Well, I get asked all the time, what DNA test should I take? That is probably the #1 question I get asked. So even if you have already taken a DNA test, you might want to stick around for this because you might learn how to take that DNA test and stretch it a little bit farther. All right, well, today I'm going to break down the differences between the different major DNA companies, and well, the whole goal is to help answer that question, what DNA test should I take? All right, well, let me introduce myself. My name is Connie Knox. I'm a lifelong genealogist here to help you go further faster and factually with your family research. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notified each time we upload a video. And speaking of not missing out on anything, don't forget there is a Genealogy TV newsletter that you'll want to be a part of. Links for that are in the show notes. And a special shout out to the Genealogy TV patrons, Karen, Beth, Deb, Debbie, Elizabeth, Lee, Allison, Laura, Sandra, and Thomas. Thank you so much for your recent patronage. For the cost of a little cup of coffee, you could probably become a patron too of Genealogy TV. You can do that at patreon.com/Genealogy TV. Thank you so much to all the patrons. All right, now, what DNA test should you take? Well, that depends on what you want to do. So let's jump over to the computer and talk about what the differences are between the companies as you think through your research goals. So you should know that you might find unexpected relationships. So always be mindful of that when taking a DNA test. So expect surprises. Many testing companies are out there, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about really the top 4. There's really 5. I was unable to get enough information about living DNA to include it in this comparison. So what test should you take? Well, that really starts with your research question. It always depends, right? So if you think about what it is that you're trying to seek, or if you're just generally curious, that's fine too. But a lot of times when people are asking me what test they want to take, they usually have something in mind. They're trying to find somebody in particular in their tree, and DNA certainly can help with that. So really it comes down to who is it that you want to know more about. Perhaps you're missing a grandfather, and so that is what you're looking for. If that's the case, then there would be a certain type of DNA test you would want to take. Perhaps you're missing a grandmother. That might be a different DNA test. Or maybe you're just generally curious, and that would probably be an autosomal DNA test. So there are 3 types of tests, 3 common tests. One is the autosomal DNA, the Y-DNA, and the mitochondrial DNA. There are other tests, but I'm not going to go into those here. These are the 3 common tests. So let's start with autosomal DNA. An autosomal test is kind of a shotgun blast, giving us DNA from all of our grandparents and beyond. So keep in mind that on an autosomal DNA test, we get 50% from our father and 50% from our mother. Look at what's left behind. If we get 50% from our father and 50% from our mother, that leaves behind 50% that is represented here in white. Represented in red is what's being handed down to you. So if 50% from a mother to a father, then up here we're looking at this parent gave 50% to this child, and this parent gave 50% to this child, so that means that only 25% is handed down to you. So you have 25% of each of your grandparents. So if we take a little bit deeper look at that on a kind of a different tree chart here, if you are down here at 100%, 50% from your father, 50% from your mother, 25% from your grandparents, as we talked about before, then you have about 12.5%, and it's not an exact, but it's about 12.5% from each grandparent, and about 6%, 6.25% from each second great-grandparent, 3% from each great-great-great-grandparent, and so on, which is not even represented here on the chart. So now it's time to talk about the Y-DNA test. So just as a reminder, if we go back to high school science class, you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. A male has an X and a Y chromosome, and a female has 2 X chromosomes. So when we're doing DNA testing, the autosomal is looking at all of the chromosomes, but the male line, we're going to be looking at that Y DNA. We're going to talk more about that here in a second. All right, so with Y DNA, 100% of that DNA is handed down from father to you. So if you're a male, okay, now women don't have a Y chromosome, so only Y DNA tests can be taken for men. So if you look at it, it's the Y DNA is handed down from the grandfather at 100%, not 50%. 100% goes from grandfather to father to the male son. And so when you're doing DNA testing, if you're seeking somebody in the grandfather, sometimes we call it the surname line, then this might be a test that you want to take. So if we take a look at the family tree in a little bit different way. Here we have a couple. Blue is obviously boy and pink is girls. So we've got a daughter, number 1 daughter, number 2 child is a son, number 3 child is a son. So if you take a look at it this way, the Y chromosome is handed down to the first son and the second son, 100%. So these 2 boys have the same Y chromosome, as does their sons down here. So all 4 of these boys have the same Y chromosome. Well, if you think about it going up the line, this child right here and this child right here has the same Y DNA as their father, as their grandfather, and so on up the line for thousands of years. All right, so here's a situation. This is a real life situation where I was able to use Y DNA to help solve a problem. And this is a problem I'm still working on, but I'm pretty close on solving it. So here is my father and my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and then I hit a brick wall. Now, just to give you the backstory, if you haven't heard this story before from one of my other videos, this woman right here, she never married. She had a lot of kids, but she never married. She liked to have children around, but she didn't care too much for the men folk. So she had children out of wedlock, which was quite controversial for the time. So my great-grandfather was born in 1862 during the Civil War. So we never have been able to find out who his father was, because she took it to her grave as to who the father or fathers of her children were. So what I did was, since my father had already passed away, I asked his first cousin, who was also a Henley, to take a Y DNA test, and he did. The Y DNA test came back with 4 matches. All 4 matches had the surname of Davis. Well, that's pretty strong evidence right there that this person right here probably has the last name of Davis, as does his father up here. I also was able to find some traditional research that where I found some bastardy bonds where she names, not specifically to when she was pregnant with this child, but for 3 other children, she named a Joshua Davis and an Exum Davis. Among other people, as bondsmen, she never named the father in any of her children in the bastardy bonds, but she does have those Joshua Davis and Exum Davis, as well as a Gibbons, I think, in there as well. But they were basically labeled as bondsmen, which basically said that they were willing to put up money to help take care of the child. But long and short of it is, often when in bastardy bonds, when a woman refuses to name the father, but men step up and help secure a bond, then sometimes those men are the actual father, but just refuse to admit it. So I plugged in Joshua Davis and his father Joel Davis as a hypothesis. Now in my tree it doesn't show this at this moment as a hypothesis, but it is labeled as a hypothesis. So I'm continuing to do research on Joshua Davis because he's named most often in the other 3 bastardy bonds for this woman. So that's an example where Y-DNA can help. Now, it turns out that this Joshua Davis also lives within probably walking distance at most. They also went to the family church, so it gives you some insight there. We'll see how that turns out. So I did label them as a hypothesis in the tree. I'm still working on it to prove it. I don't know that I'll ever be able to prove it exactly, because Joshua Davis and Exum Davis are brothers. And so they would carry the same Y-DNA also. So we'll see how that saga turns out. We're now going to talk about the mitochondrial DNA. So the mitochondrial DNA is helpful for researching the mother's line, but there could be other uses for it as well. Mitochondrial DNA is always passed down from mother to both children, male and female. The mother makes an exact copy and passes it down in her egg. However, only daughters will pass it down to the next generation. Males do not. So let's take a look at our tree again, but this time with the idea of a mitochondrial DNA. So remember, the mitochondrial DNA is passed down from the mother to all children. And in this case, we have a daughter, again, the son, and a son. So the sons are also inheriting the mitochondrial DNA. So the mitochondrial DNA in this case would also pass down to the first child's children as well. So they would carry that DNA as well. Let's talk about the different testing companies. So we have Ancestry DNA, FamilyTreeDNA, 23andMe, and MyHeritage DNA. I would have loved to have included living DNA in this as well, but I was unable to get them to respond to my requests for information in time for this recording. As you're deciding what test to take, you want to keep your research question in mind. And well, here we've got the 4 major testing companies, and Ancestry does only autosomal DNA as well as MyHeritage. 23andMe does all 3, but it's a bundled test, so you're getting a 3. They call it a 3-in-1 test, I believe. And FamilyTreeDNA does these individually or bundled. And so I have tested at, well, I actually have test kits at all of these companies. I did do these individual, I've done quite a bit on FamilyTreeDNA, especially with the Y-DNA as I was trying to research that problem. If you don't know what you want, I recommend the autosomal DNA test. All companies offer them. So also keep in mind that you can upload and download raw DNA to other testing companies and to Gedmatch, quite frankly, we'll talk about that in a minute, to expand your cousin matches. Because it's really in the cousin matches where you're going to find the most benefit. Ancestry DNA does not allow you to upload raw DNA, but they will allow you to download it. They do not have a health report, but they have started doing something they call traits. And I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm going to do a whole episode on Ancestry later. MyHeritage does allow you to upload raw DNA. They do allow you to download raw DNA, and they have started doing a health report. And they're going to continue to add different tests to those test sets that are up there already. 23andMe, the bundle, they do not allow upload of raw DNA. They do allow the download of raw DNA to another service. In fact, all of these companies do. And 23andMe is most famous for their health report. It's quite extensive. I've taken it. It's quite interesting. They keep adding more and more tests to it. I just thought it was kind of fascinating. FamilyTreeDNA, you can upload to FamilyTreeDNA. You can download from FamilyTreeDNA. They do not have a health report. So how much does it cost? Well, Ancestry's normal price is about $99, and it's usually on sale often during the holidays, as all of them go on sale during the holidays, for about $59. I think one time I saw it drop as low as $49. That is a rare occasion. MyHeritage, I think, is normally $89, and their sale price is $59. 23andMe, now 23andMe ranges from $99 to $199, depending on which test you buy. I have never seen it on sale. Perhaps it goes on sale and I've just missed it, but I've never seen 23andMe go on sale. FamilyTreeDNA, now this is kind of a little bit complex segment here, FamilyTreeDNA, because they sell their kits individually, their autosomal DNA is $79. Their Y-DNA kit is $167 to $637, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more in depth here in just a second. And then the mitochondrial DNA ranges from $89 to $199. And with the family tree DNA, the autosomal tree DNA is called Family Finder if you're looking for that service. And they offer the Y DNA and the mitochondrial DNA individually and bundled with the Family Finder. FamilyTreeDNA's mitochondrial kits, they offer two different levels. And that's why we have the range here from $89 to $199. They call it the regular, it's a regular mitochondrial kit, and then they have what they call the full sequence. With the Y kits, there is, well, we're going to talk about that here in the next slide, so let's jump over there. So on the Y kits with FamilyTreeDNA, they have the Y37, the Y67, the Y111, and the big Y700. And what that is the number of markers that they're testing. I highly recommend that you do at least, if you're going to do a Y-DNA test, that you do at least the 67 marker. The 37 won't get you much. It'll get you something, and the best way I can explain it is the more markers you can afford to test, the more narrow focused your test results will be, and you will get better results with the higher test. So if you can at least do the 67, I highly recommend it. All right, so let's talk about how big is their database. Well, Ancestry is the big gorilla. They have 15 million DNA test kits out there now. MyHeritage is at 3 million, according to what they just told me the other day. And I believe Family Tree is at 1 million, and 23andMe is right around there. I think it's at 1.5. So just a reminder too that you can also download your raw DNA from any of the test companies and upload it to Gedmatch to gain more cousin matches. Now Gedmatch is that service that is kind of a standalone service. They don't do testing, but they do. This was created by a couple guys who are kind of software geeks, and they had created this way of taking the raw DNA and creating an algorithm so that they could be tested against other testing companies. Well, they offer that pretty much for free. There is a paywall on part of it, but you can upload there. And so anybody from any testing company could cross-match with you there. So you can upload to other companies by downloading your raw DNA and uploading it to other companies that will accept raw DNA. Now, not everybody does. For example, Ancestry does not. And so you can do that to help, basically, so you don't have to test at all the different companies. But there is a fee on some of those services. So let's think about that targeted strategy for a minute. We want to identify that problem. We want to create a research question. You want to take the right test to solve the problem, and you want to build a tree online so that it matches with the test. And then, of course, attach the DNA test to that tree. So what DNA test should you take? Well, it all will depend on who you're looking for in your family cluster. So if you want to learn more about what test to take or more about DNA in general, you can do so. Some of these links that I've got here are in the show notes below and at genealogytv.org. But the ISOGG Wiki, which is the International Society of Genetic Genealogists, they have a wiki that is full of information. Oh my gosh, there's so much information. And some of the information in this presentation came from that website. Also, highly recommend, cannot recommend it enough, is Blaine Bettinger's book, The Guide to DNA Testing in Genetic Genealogy. Fabulous book, really well written, certainly can understand it. It's my favorite book for DNA testing. Well, I hope that helped you understand a little bit more about the world of DNA and how it can help you. As always, links for everything that I talked about in this episode are in the show notes below and at genealogytv.org. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you get notified each time we upload a video. And make sure you're linked up with the newsletter. Links for that, again, are in the show notes. Special shout out to those patrons again. I really appreciate your support. If you would like to become a patron of Genealogy TV, you can do so at patreon.com/Genealogy TV. It's that simple. All right, it's time for you to go find your ancestors. So until next time, keep on climbing your family tree.